Hi, it's John from Historic Graves, and I'm in the village of Quin in County Clare, walking in along to Quin Friary. We've been working here since June as part of a Heritage Council funded survey with the Quin Heritage Group. Really busy, active heritage group. And I'd say this is my fourth visit to Quin. I don't really know this part of County Clare very well, getting to know it now. But it's a fabulous place. We did a talk last night for Heritage Week. Lovely turnout. We didn't talk about the archaeology of the place or genealogy. The theme of Heritage Week this year is about living heritage. So we kind of delved into the living heritage of a graveyard, which is all about death. So it was enjoyable in a sense, like you get to talk about why we organise our graveyards in particular ways. And Quin Friary is an unusual place. It's not your usual Irish rural graveyard, but it's pivotal because it's a continuance of medieval burial practices into the post-medieval period. And the norm in an Irish rural graveyard is that the burials are all south of the church, and that's where we are now, what we're looking at here. A lot of modern burials in here too, all south of the church. But the thing about a lot of our graveyards is that if you have a saint's grave, the closer you're buried to the saint's grave, or then inside the church, the closer you're buried to the altar or inside the church, the easier it is in the Catholic faith to get to heaven. And that's particularly the case here in the Friary. Over time, families believed that the closer you got buried to the interior, the quicker you go to heaven. So there's a lot of graves inside the intramural burials, let's call it, inside the walls. And we're going to look at them now in a minute. There were some very interesting questions at the talk last night, and one of them was relating to this family here, Peter Moylan. This gent died in 1920, and who was there last night was Peter's, I presume, great-grandson. Yeah, and great-great-granddaughter. They're based inside in Ennis now, but the Moylans at one stage lived out this direction, and they were farming, they had land, but they had gathered a big herd of horses who were rustled on them at the time of the Crimean War, and they lost their, they went bust out this way, and then they moved into Ennis and got into business in there. And what was interesting talking to Peter is that when you look at this Celtic cross, it's got the die, the base, the die, the shaft, the ring and the cross. But when you look at the ornament that's on it, it's not religious. It's got the Sacred Heart in the middle, alright. But here, the rest of it is nationalistic, and Peter was telling us is that his grandfather was very involved in politics, and he was a supporter of Dave, if I'm not misremembering. So, and you can see that on this beautifully carved. There is a Celtic interlace, but then there's the shamrock, and then the harp here, and it's beautifully carved. The monumental sculptors are Daly's of Ennis, and I don't know, maybe Daly's had that skill set there, but that feels to me like they got in a stone carver or a sculptor to actually do that bit of work for them on the face of that. So that's a beaut. And Peter had some really interesting comments about the heritage of businesses inside in towns, partnerships and property ownership and access to credit and things like that. So very interesting. What I'm not going to go into now at all is that actually this was built first as a castle, and there on that section, where's my lens, up there, so there's a corner tower there. This is the remains of a corner tower here. Where's my hand? Yeah. So it was built as a defensive structure in the 13th century, and then being in County Clare, it didn't have a very easy life. By the 1430s, I think it was changed into a friary under the control of the McNamaras. And speaking of McNamaras, one of the speakers with me last night was Anne McNamara, and Anne's a local historian. She used to work in the library inside in Ennis, so I'd say she knows half the county. and she has a remarkable collection of local history for Quinn. And this was one of her family graves. It's not, she's a Mac, but she's a Halloran as well, and this is a Halloran headstone. And these Hallorans were blacksmiths. It doesn't stand out very well now, but at the top here there's a horseshoe, there's a bellows, there's an anvil over there. So, and this is the modern version of it here alongside. You can see that the Hallorans are very proud of their tradition of being smiths and blacksmiths. And its prime location really is just outside the entrance into the chancel of the church. And this then, a fabulous sight. What Anne told us was that in the 1870s and 1880s there was a major movement towards getting buried inside here. So I suspect every square inch of the chancel, the nave and the south transept here has been dug with late 19th century graves. There would have been headstones here, and there would have been recumbent slabs, these flat slabs, and they've all been tidied up now as part under the stewardship of the OPW. And as the visitors come in, and it's quite well visited, this pocket of County Clare, east of Ennis, has a big tourist trade. I'm really surprised to see how many tourists they get here. Very, very busy. I suppose it all goes back to the Shannon development days with Craganoan and Napo Castle and Bunratty. A lot of what we do in our surveys is we're tracing families, and we're looking for the old. In recent times we're starting to look for the old Gaelic lordships, and boy do you have a Gaelic lordship here. 3 of the graves we looked at last night. One is that box tomb in the corner in there, and then if I turn around all the way up by the altar inside in the chancel, all the way up in there, both of them are McNamara graves with medieval origins, and this one a tomb niche as well, which I suspect is also McNamara, and we'll look at that in a sec. Mostly when we're looking at the dates on headstones, we're getting early 1700s and then continuing up. Sometimes we'll get late 1600s, but this box tomb here in the corner is quite innocuous, not very fancy, but it's in prime real estate inside in the south transept. And there is for sure, very definitely, on the third line, the date of 1590. Can I see it? Tomb was erected, yeah, there. Can't see it. Can you see that in the video? 1560. Okay, and repaired. So it was the McNamara said it was erected in 1560 and repaired by ancestors in 1768. Here we go, 1768. There's a flat top on the 8. So what we're getting is stories passed down within the McNamaras, who had been a major family in the Gaelic lordship, and burials here being repaired in 1768. So the Gaelic lordship didn't all vanish with the flight of the Earls. I remember being in school and being very depressed by the Battle of Kinsale and the flight of the Earls, and thinking, oh, it was the end. But that wasn't the end. What it was a new accommodation thereafter. The middling families of the Gaelic lordship, I suspect, stayed on and remained the middling families of the new structures, because the new ascendancy needed middlemen and middle families, and I think that's where the power lay, and client relationships with the bigger families probably continued. So McNamara there's a famous character of the McNamaras called Fireball McNamara, and he was around 1790s, real Jacobite by the sounds of it. And this is a modern monument that's erected for him, this Celtic cross here, and we suspect it's located here because this is the coat of arms for the McNamaras. We couldn't read what's on the headstone there, but if we can work out, maybe we'll do RTI, which is that photographic technique for reading really faint lettering. Then maybe it'll refer to the Fireball McNamara. It's we won't get facts that he's buried here. He could be buried abroad. He had links out and military links out on the continent and so on. But local tradition has that he died in fairly reduced circumstances in a small little country house but he is potentially buried here, and local memory is potentially recording that. So that corner of the south transept has two important McNamara stones. This plain stone here on the ground is in the register for archaeological monuments in County Shim with the break on it, and there's an axe, a wood axe carved on it, and it's believed that it memorialises a carpenter who had been working in the church. Again, we couldn't get a date off that. What we could get is when we looked at this tomb niche here. The tomb niches are 14th century, 15th century, I suppose mostly 15th century, are they? The church here was built 1433, so the tomb niches, can we see if it's an insert? Yes, it is an insert. But it is potentially 15th century. And as we were here on the last day of the survey a couple of weeks ago, we realised that what we had was a floriated cross. So I don't know, can you see that shaft there? And the shaft continues up to other designs there, and that's early. So that's a medieval cross. But what's carved on it then is a later inscription. So this is a stratigraphic sequence here. Here lieth the body of Edmund McNamara, son to Hugh McNamara of, I don't know, Corbally maybe. Deceased, departed this life, 1761. 1761. The early ones are like bent nails, so I don't know, can you see that in there? So there we have a 1760s headstone. Over yonder in the corner we have a 1760s box tomb repaired. So the McNamaras are back on their feet after losing a lot of their land to larger landlords. Their identity is being portrayed now, or is being demonstrated with their grave monuments. And then here, as we come into the chancel, which is fairly difficult to understand in some ways, but there is this, when you look at the arch there at the top and then it comes down, that should be going fully onto the ground, but this grave monument was inserted. So if the tomb niche is a bit later and this is a bit later with the canopy, then we're looking at maybe late 15th century, early 16th century perhaps, of an insertion for a grave tomb. There is a date on this slab here, but it's a modern date. It says 1402, McNamara of Ale. So that's and there's a lead inlay on that. So we're seeing some kind of antiquarian additions here. This is so plain, I don't know, is that normal? The early script on this is here. It's this Lombardic script. And then we have a later, early 18th century monument in here, 1714. The McNamara, the Hound of the Sea. That's their chest of coat of arms. This monument was erected by Mahon Dowell McNamara and repaired by Captain Tig McNamara of Ranna, 1714. So the McNamaras of Ranna were quite prominent, and that fellow was inserted then. So 1714. So Captain Tig, obviously, potentially, I would suspect being. No, I can't say it because I don't know. There's a chance that he went across to Europe as part of the Catholic and Irish forces loyal to King James. And what question asked last night is, were they buried inside in that structure there, inside in that chamber? And maybe there was an early burial in there. In the 19th century ones, those kind of box tombs are too small to hold a coffin. So there's nearly always a structure underneath the ground. And I suspect also here there's potentially a structure underneath the ground there, some kind of a burial vault, either under it or here in front of it or off to the side. Colleen Driscoll in Kilkenny, and I know some other archaeologists, Dan Noonan in Youghal, has excavated some of them. I must look more into that. But it would be nice to actually try and find out what is happening under that. The big risk they took cutting through the base of that whole gable is incredible. And then another story that Anne Mack had for us last night related to these three stones here. That's a bishop, Reverend Patrick McMahon, Bishop of Killaloe and parish priest of Quinn, And these 3 stones here in Countshin or in Tallaght, that one on the wall, he was the uncle, and these 2 were Corbetts, and they were sons or nephews who became priests. And between the 3 of them, they were parish priests of Quinn for 100 years or thereabouts. And one of these gents here on the wall and on the ground, they started building St Mary's next door, and the other one finished it. So the Mahans and the McMahons and the Corbetts, other senior families of the parish when we got into the 1700s and 1800s. And then one of the most remarkable things that's in the church here, which I didn't know until Yvonne and Siobhan showed me, there's actually a plaster ornament here on the wall, and it's a crucified Christ. You can see the forearm, Christ's forearm, and his hand with the crucifixion nail through it there. And then there's ornaments down both sides, and it's so unusual. We just don't see a lot of these all over the country, and here we have one in Quinn. We'll often see crucifixions on a stone, and I'll show you one inside, but this one is just hanging on here, and it really needs conservation work. It's so rare and so important. So hopefully the OPW, who are doing a nice tidy job looking after the place, will actually look after this structure here. The sacristy is off to the side here, and there's burials in here. So like I said earlier, I think there's burials galore all in here. Now, not every one of them would have got gravestones. This is an important early stone. What family did Daniel McNamara? Okay, so it's other branches of the McNamaras with the IHS on top, and the sunburst and the heart. The sunburst, it's not pagan, it's Christian, because the sun represents Christ. So it's not sun worship. It's fully the Bible in charge of everything. And then we go into the cloisters for the Franciscan friars. One of the best preserved cloisters you get. And there's modern burials in here. There's 20th century burials inside in the cloisters. 1759. (1964), 1979, 1993. So old style monuments. And I just want to finish down here. I mentioned the plaster crucifix, and here we have one carved in stone. It's unusual because there's a long-haired Christ on the cross. You see that there?
Hello.
I do.
Are you recording?
I am. So who's that? Corbett, in memory of his father Michael Corbett, 1822, age 58, and Honora Corbett, his mother, who was alias Hare, 1829. So the size of the stone, the quality of the work is telling you that those Corbetts had money. And then the last one I want to show was the last Franciscan friar who had lived in this friary. And his stone, for some reason, it's right by this door here. I presume he's buried here, but it's really well preserved. It's highly polished because it gets walked on so much, but it doesn't seem to be suffering from it. We've winged heads at the top. We have the beginnings of a scrolling foliage, another winged head there, IHS and the upside down heart. And here lies the body of the Reverend John Horgan of Drim. Drim is only a couple of miles out the road, who departed life 1820, aged 82 years. So Reverend John Horgan is one of those rare individuals. Hogan, H-O-G-A-N, is one of those rare individuals who actually lived throughout most of the penal times. Penal laws changed in the late 1820s. They came in, in the 1680s? So they were 20 years on the go. Probably the worst of them had worked their way through by the time he was born. I think by 1710, 1714 you could register as a Catholic priest and not be hunted and chased. once you abided by the rules. But he lived throughout penal times, and he finished his life here as a Franciscan friar. When driven from the Abbey of Quinn, he was supported by the pious donations of the faithful and served as an auxiliary to his neighbouring parish priests in the vineyard of the Lord. He knew how to abound to suffice want, and the Lord to suffer want, as the Lord was pleased to send. He died in holy poverty, respectful for his strictures in religious discipline. So there, very much of the that's what the religion meant to some people. Sounds like he lived a good friar's life. This is the kitchen. Lots of burials in it. The Archangel Gabriel here in a stone. Can you see that? We had one gent in here last night who thinks he has family buried there without a stone over the grave. And we definitely have modern burials down here. Actually, I should have thought of that. There's a Hogan buried in here, 1949, 1965, 1976. So maybe connected with the Friar Hogan. So we had a good group last night, and people were interested and interesting, and we talked about things. We didn't go into the archaeology, we didn't go into a lot of the genealogy. We spoke about the Gaelic lordships. This is the refectory. That looks like the reading window that somebody would have sat up there and read the Psalms and things while the friars had their meals. It was all about prayer, but now there's burials in here as well. And it's there's some dispute over what these stones are. You have to do a study on that. Are they stones marking graves, which I think there's a strong case to be made for, or are they relating to a wooden floor? It looks to me like a stone floor. Now there's collapse in the stone as well, which is in the floor, which potentially the remains of graves underneath is sinking beneath them. The River Rhine outside the abbey. The friary and the graveyard are in a bend of the River Rhine, which runs down further into the River Fergus, which goes out into Shannon Estuary. Really beautiful place. So we'd recommend a visit, and the group are working on the typing up the record sheets that we recorded. We also did St. Finian's, which is across the way. Can I see it out this door? And we did a wee bit in St. Mary's. Yeah. There's St. Finian's out in Shin. So they've recorded them as well. This is interesting. Who's in here now? Oh yeah, that's the door to the mausoleum for the butlers of Dunboyne, who it's been suggested were a cadet family of the butlers of Ormond, and came over here for a couple of generations, and there's a substantial mausoleum inside behind that door. There's a wee window on the outer external face, so if you're ever passing and you can peek in through that, you can see shelves of coffins. It's a sacred space, sacred burial. We didn't go poking in or anything because it's a burial, it's a grave. But you can see what an interesting place this was, and quite a challenging survey, but well met by the local community here. Great place, and I look forward to coming back. There's lots more to explore, lots more to learn. Oh yeah, Anne showed us that yesterday. Some of the carvings on the stones in the cloisters. So, John Tierney. Oh yeah, that's what I'll finish on. I like the humble little graves. That little threshold stone there looks like it has prey on it, so it's potentially a memorial. I'd say somebody was buried here and the family hadn't a bob, and they tried to carve the memorial on the stone that was here already. Can you see the P-R-A-Y here, Shin? So there you are. The great and the good and the humble are all buried here, all together in consecrated ground in Quin Friary. What a place. Slánanish.